The Wolfsbane is the name of a beautiful and seemingly innocent purple flower. Looks can be deceiving, however, as even the slightest touch with the Queen of Poisons can result in your death. Wolfsbane is the nickname of a friendly and seemingly innocent merchant from a land far away, just trying to sell his business. Personalities can be deceiving, however, as an interaction with the King of Poisons can result in your death in mere seconds. Wolfsbane can use its body to mimic the anatomy, color and body pattern of the Wolfsbane in a deadly manner, making it one of his signature moves. But Wolfsbane utilizes his agility in various ways to great extents, making him a powerful fighter all around the board. And somehow all of this ties to his prowess in using poison to quickly eliminate all his targets. The moments between death and getting poisoned can only be described as pure agony, as the list of symptoms are endless. But see, dealing with deadly substances on the regular comes at a cost, a heavy cost. In the desert, it was not a difficult task to eliminate those laws, and preying on the weak is always easy. What is a notorious merchant with an unrivaled kill count from a land far away doing in the land of shadow and the lands between? Now, Elden Ring's DLC has made poison and mechanics that revolve around poison build up stronger than ever, especially if you become the Wolfsbane, truly renowned for its skills to utilize poison while also being a very skilled fighter. Wolfsbane isn't just experienced in regular poison and very deadly poison, but also scarlet rot and blood loss as the product of his extremely deadly poison, making this build have 3 different status effects. However, you can also just keep it purely poison as well, so how does my build here work? Well, we're going to use a few weapons that complement each other extremely well. A great katana, poison bottles, a fist weapon, and a claw weapon. It will become very clear and apparent to you why these completely different types of weapons synergize extremely well together as the video progresses. However, right away I can already tell you that we will be mostly using the poisoned hand in our offhand, and this is going to be pretty much a permanent damage boost with today's setup and playstyle, as the poisoned hand gives you a damage boost every single time you proc poison. So it's an extremely powerful option for this build. But first we have to talk about the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War, which is a powerful Ash of War and the only poison Ash of War added with the DLC. So what this Ash of War basically does is that every time you proc poison on your enemies, you can use this Ash of War to deal a lot of burst damage on the poison target, with the trade-off of you essentially cleansing your target from the poison. But when it truly starts to shine is when you can get multiple of these kicks in and get the burst back to back, as you will see today, as the poison keeps proccing over and over, as well as utilize weapons and ashes of wars that apply poison too, but in the process of doing so deal insane damage. The DPS gets truly nuts with my Wolfsbane build. Now, as you see in this fight with the hippo, you can see how quickly this can get out of control with this new Ash of War, as well as the ability to proc poison very quickly, but also keep poison applied on the target after you've already used your Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War, and how that exactly works with this build will also become apparent as the video progresses. Every time we kick, we then also apply a bunch of Scarlet Rot, as that's just a part of the Ash of War, and it builds up quite some Scarlet Rot with every kick. Ultimately, you can see how fast the hippo goes down with this setup. Now, for our experienced players, you might recognize the idea of this Ash of War already. It's because the base game has a similar Ash of War called Poison Moth Flight. So for those that don't have the DLC, well, you can still use the budget version of this Ash of War. However, the Poison Flower Blooms Twice is just a lot better and renders Poison Moth Flight pretty much obsolete in my opinion. The DLC Ash of War deals more base damage, can be applied on anything, while Poison Moth Flight can only be applied on a few weapon types, and it builds up Scarlet Rot at the same time too, like I already said, and is also more flexible and easier to get off as it has some range to it, unlike Poison Moth Flight. So overall, yeah, the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War wins here. Also, I have a very random question for you, but have you ever thought of getting into programming? Yes? Oh wow, that is a coincidence, because Boot.dev is today's sponsor in fact. Thanks to them for sponsoring the video. Boot.dev is a platform that uses smart techniques to learn new coding, while never getting bored. How? Well, Boot.dev is online, self-paced, and feels like a captivating RPG game, just like Elden Ring really. You will even earn XP, levels, achievements, and complete quests to get a top spot on the global leaderboard. You will learn back-end web development from start to finish in Python and the Go programming language, and the platform is designed to get you to write a ton of code, because getting your hands on the keyboard and shipping projects is the only way to really learn. Programmers have amazing earning potential. According to Stack Overflow, the median salary for back-end developers in the USA, for example, in 2023 was over $100,000. So what are you waiting for? Become a programmer right now. Click the link in the description description box and use my code as shown on screen to get 25% off your first payment for boot.dev. That is 25% for your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription that you choose. You can get it right away as well when entering the DLC zone. You just want to bypass Castle Ansys like this, move towards the Morth runes, and then move towards the north in this direction into the swampy areas, and then head towards the west to the Ancient Runes base. There you can go southwest, and ultimately you want to go to this spot exactly. You'll find a scarab there, and you want to just kill it to get this Ash of War. You can put this Ash of War on anything you like, but for this build we're going to put it on the Venomous Fangs. As these claws are extremely deadly, they come with innate poison and have the claws moveset, which means insane attack speed, thus great DPS, as well as very fast poison procs. We then infuse these claws with the blood affinity to make them synergize with the rest of the build, and this then gives us two status effects, blood loss buildup and poison buildup at the same time when we use our claws. And to show you how powerful this already is in combination with our Ash of War, let's go ahead and kill our first Remembrance boss, as part of our conquest to kill all Remembrance bosses, Relana. We use our claws in a dual wielding fashion, which you can get by just two-handing your claws. Using the DPS and speed of the claws, we get the bonuses extremely quickly from our consecutive attack based bonus damage modifiers that are in our build that I will talk about later, and we get the blood and poison proc very fast too. You see, the damage rakes up, and while Relana then starts doing moves of her own, we can use those moments to, let the poison do its thing, but also use it as a good moment to reset, get the kick in, and do a lot of burst damage. Then we just do it again with the amazing DPS of the claws. The raw physical damage in combination with proccing blood loss and poison leads to insane DPS. And ultimately, we finish off Relana with another kick to get the burst in, and the damage meters do not lie, over 30k damage in one sequence. Now, there are multiple aspects in regards to how our damage is getting so crazy or so brazy. One of those things is that we can get bonus damage through gear and talismans tied to proccing poison whenever we want. See, the Deadly Poison perfume bottles has an Ash of War called Deadly Poison Spray, which allows you to proc poison on yourself at all times, which is obviously going to be insanely useful. It will give us a huge damage boost with today's setup right away whenever we want. But you might ask, will you not just kill yourself if you poison yourself all the time? Well, see, poison's damage comes mostly from its HP percentage based mechanic, mostly designed for bosses, and since you as a character have 1900 HP when fully soft capped at 60 vigor versus bosses that can have tens of thousands of HP, especially in the DLC, the damage sticks are going to be barely noticeable on yourself. So it's a great, thematically relevant way to pretty much instantly get a huge damage bonus at the start of a fight that will also keep being applied in combat, as we will proc poison all the time with this build. Aside from using it this way, these bottles are in fact also great in combat, offensively speaking. You can buy the Deadly Poison perfume bottle in pretty much the starting area of the DLC, near the Pillar Path cross side of Grace. See, these bottles have absolutely insane poison buildup, pretty much allowing you to proc poison instantly, very consistently on anything really, and the density of the poison particles is very good too. Basically, if a boss just comes in touch with a single fume, poison can already get procced on them, as you see in this example. Now, the spray's deadly effectiveness combined with the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War is an extremely deadly combo. And what is an extremely deadly combo too is you hitting the subscribe button and the like button, and then combo that with joining my Patreon to support the channel, or to get them juicy written guides that I post there of all my builds as well. So let's go ahead and show off this combo, as well as just the general build-up of this build that we have on the Dancing Lion. Congratulations to the Lion for being our test dummy, which with us spraying our deadly poison, here we can already get the insta-proc on the poison, making the Lion suffer. And immediately we follow it up with the Poison Flower Blooms Twice high kick for a huge burst. But as you see, the DOT is still kicking in on his HP bar even after the kick. And this is because the Lion just lingered in our cloud for a second too long, granting us 2 poison procs from a singular deadly poison spray. You heard that right. The Deadly Poison perfume bottle's Ash of War is so deadly, it can give you 2 poison procs in one go, even if you cleanse the first one off, which is what I hinted at before. And then we follow that up with another kick to cleanse the Lion from the poison, granting us even more burst. But while we're kicking the Lion, we get that Scarlet Rot build up too. So while we're bursting down our poisoned enemies, or just using the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War in general, we will get that Scarlet Rot proc too in addition, as you can see. It is a win-win situation. And Scarlet Rot is basically just a Super Saiyan version of poison. After it activates, you can let it eat away all your enemy's HP while you chill in the background. Of course, that is a valid tactic. Like I'm doing here with the lion, I can keep running around and around till it runs out. But obviously, I don't have that much patience. So we go for another poison flower blooms twice after a little bit, giving us that burst for the clean kill. And I also want to mention that the poison flower blooms twice builds up approximately 160 Scarlet Rot per kick with the stinger under your feet, so depending on a few variables and the enemy's resistance to Scarlet Rot, you can already proc it as fast as say with only 2 kicks. So a lot of potential there. Now going back to poison and our bottles, there's one thing to note about them, and that is that you can use them in one hand or in both hands. And in that sense, these bottles are similar to other weapon classes and types like claws and fists, and depending on how you wield them, it will grant you a different moveset. The one-handed normal attacks and charge attacks will deal less damage per hit compared to the dual-wielding normal attacks and charge attacks, and the one-handed setup also will build up poison slower than the dual-wielding setup, as you can see in this side-by-side comparison. However, it's usually only a matter of an additional cast for the poison proc with a one-handed setup versus the dual-wielding setup. The difference in damage and poison build-up is really not that huge, especially when you consider that the one-handed attacks with the bottles come out much faster than the dual-wielding setup. The faster speeds of the one-handed setup can easily net to higher DPS overall, as you'll get more openings with them in combat and thus have more sustained damage versus the slower nature of the dual-wielding setup. Hence why I personally like using these one-handed. For this build, you want to take down Commander Gaius as fast as possible for a skill that he will reward us. And this guy is then also next up. See, just the normal and charge attacks of these poison bottles are an excellent option in combat too, and they work on horseback as well. And I'm using the normal attacks right from the get-go here in this fight. As you see, the normal attacks have quite the spread and range, and the damage on them rakes up very quickly as you can spam them very efficiently. See, these attacks, while looking somewhat magic-esque, do not consume any FP, which is obviously going to be a very useful aspect for these bottles to either spam or weave in damage with them thanks to their aerial spread and range. On Commander Gaius, you can also dodge a lot of his attacks while using these bottles. Basically what you do is move away from his back and his head while weaving in the poison. If you go to his back, the horse will kick you with his legs, and if you go to the front, then Mr. Gaius will do some shenanigans with his sword and abilities. So you can quite efficiently take care of this guy by pretty much altering your pathing and circulating around him. And the poison bottle's huge spread will give you amazing DPS here. Look at the numbers. And that is also because the moveset of these poison bottles also apply poison, obviously, just not as instantly as its Ash of War. But all those things combined results in a lot of damage, as you see. In the second phase of the Commander Gaius fight, I'll be using the charge attacks of the bottles for variety's sake, but also because the charge attacks will hit harder and also have a bigger spread compared to the normal attacks, with the trade-off of these attacks taking longer to come out. If you chain the charge attacks, you can in fact also stance break bosses just with mere gas. Yes, you heard that right, and as you see, this can be very useful to give you momentum. Commander Gaius gets stance broken, and you can obviously use that to get a critical hit in, or just to keep spraying more poison and deal more damage. Ultimately, using the bottle's moveset is going to be a very efficient way to take this guy down, and in return, you get something very useful for this build. After getting Commander Gaius' sword lance, you can extract its Ash of War from it and place it on anything you want. You get the Spitting Gravity Thrust Ash of War here, which will be the final piece of the build. See, this Ash of War is also tied to the Wolfsbane plant. You might have not seen it yet, but all the signs are really there, as indicated by the Ash of War's purple colors and structure resembling the plant. You also notice it in game, functionally speaking, because the Ash of War builds up poison extremely fast too, in one of the fastest ways humanly possible, while doing a lot of damage in the process. Now, my choice here to put this Ash of War on a poison-infused Great Katana makes a lot of sense to me. Hear me out here. See, this Ash of War can only be placed on a few types of weapons, mostly the more heavy type of weapon classes. The Great Katana is an excellent option here because it already has innate blood loss, and making it poison-infused gives us both status effects at the same time, while the scaling of a poison Great Katana fits my other choices of weapons here too. See, it will scale with Dexterity and Arcane in similar fashion to our bottles, which scale precisely with those stats as well as our claws. It is amazing synergy, and the Great Katana with this Ash of War gives us the final bit of the puzzle. Let me just show you how a Great Katana with the Wolfsbane Ash of War in today's setup works to make my point. We're going to visit the Fingering boss for this purpose, and get our 4th remembrance. See, right away the damage becomes absolutely redonkulous. This Ash of War is no joke. And while we're getting all the damage in, we get that Bloodlust and Poison proc yet again. The poison is really nice for these fights, as the DLC bosses have a lot more HP than most of the base game bosses. So that's great news for the poison's percentage based mechanic. So while we're dodging and waiting for our next opening, the poison keeps sticking. Then of course we get the kick in for the major burst, amplified by our poison proc, damage bonus modifiers and other gear pieces. And then we just do it again, find a good opening for the fight, start ramping up your move, and just look at this. It's art. It is art. What I like about the spinning gravity thrust move is that it comes with very good hyper armor, as you perhaps already saw. We're getting hit all the time while spinning, but it doesn't phase us at all. Then you can also steer it to target weak points of enemies, as your body's pathing is quite flexible with this Ash of War. And every hit or touch with your enemies builds up status effects on them. So even if you only use this Ash of War once, you can already get the poison proc, while dealing a ton of damage at the same time. As you see, another sequence where we deal 20k damage in just mere seconds, and at the end we finish it off with another kick, just for the style points. Now Mesmer is going to be our 5th Remembrance boss kill, and by now it has become apparent how the different aspects of the build synergize. In this fight I'm going to show you how many times you actually can proc Poison and Scarlet Rot in a single fight and utilize those procs. We use our bottle's deadly spray at the start, luring Mesmer to get a sniff of the good old stuff, and while he lands from his dive right into your poison spray, he gets the poison proc instantly, and we chain that immediately with a poison flower blooms twice from our side, so we can get proc yet again from the same spray as the spray lingers for a good number of seconds. After that, it's a good time to dodge his attacks and wait for a new opening. See, the poison spray actually puts deadly poison on whatever it poisons instead of regular poison, which is a more aggressive, higher DPS version of poison. So while we're dodging here and just, saying to Mesmer, no, you can't touch us, we still get a lot of damage in. Then after that, when the time is ready, you get another kick in. You can even wait till the very last second of where the deadly poison or Scarlet Rot takes to get maximum damage like that through these status effects. But for faster DPS, I just like re-procking poison over and over and getting as many kicks in as possible. Then we get more kicks in, and as you saw, we've already procced poison twice by now, and here we also proc Scarlet Rot. As indicated with the red particles, we then finish off the Scarlet Rot with another kick, kicking him right into phase 2. In phase 2, he does a similar move as with the start of phase 1 at the start of phase 2, so we get our balls out yet again, spray it around for where he lands approximately to get an instant poison proc going, and rinse and repeat going forward. We let the deadly poison do its thing while we dodge his moves to keep our DPS high, and then another kick. And finally, we go for the 4th poison proc. As you know, in Elden Ring, the threshold for proccing a status effect on your enemy raises with every single proc. In the case of Mesmer, for its 4th proc, it's nearly 1300 poison buildup, as you see here. But with our deadly spray, we still get it pretty much instantly. That's how great these new bottles are. They are very aggressive in applying poison, as you see. And ultimately, we finish the fight off with using our claws, getting some more damage and getting a Bloodlust poison proc. The insane DPS of the claws is a great way to finish off the fight, but we go for the reliable bursty kick yet again. The poison flower blooms twice is great at all times. But I hear you, what about fights where the enemy is immune to poison? I'll do you one better. What if the enemy boss is immune to poison and bloodlust at the same time? Well, that is what Remembrance boss number 6 is, the Putrescent Knight. Because my build here optimizes for both status effect build up at the same time and damage, and we can proc poison on ourselves to get all the poison proc related buffs going, this is never going to be a real problem. As you see with spinning gravity thrust on the Putrescent Knight, it completely annihilates this thing with just the sheer raw damage of this Ash of War. Poison and bloodlust immune? Well, yeah, who cares, right? Not us! As you've already seen, there are a lot of possibilities with this build. One more use case that I haven't highlighted yet, however, is utilizing the poison bottle spread and range to quickly deal with otherwise hard to reach weak spots, like the weak spot of the Remembrance boss, the Shadow Tree Avatar. We can use the poison fumes here to very effectively take care of this boss, spraying it right on his face, like, spraying those bugs hiding into the holes of your house and annihilating them. Well, here we do that same thing, getting the weak spot bonus, and because the range and spread of these fumes is actually really good, it's a very good option here. Much better than using any melee weapon. We can still use our melee weapons for the juicy crits, however, of course, but outside of that, it's going to be a lot of spraying to get rid of this, weird looking plant quickly. A lot of spraying, killing off this thing, monster thing, whatever this thing is, and what's great about our great poison purchase here is that the fumes actually also tend to hit the boss, even when you don't expect them to do so. And for those that have always wanted to spray graffiti legal, well, your time has come. With that, that, it is another fight Dunsky. Now what about bosses like Romina, which is immune to both Scarlet Rot and Poison? I didn't tell or show you yet, but see, our offhand weapon is actually also really good when we use it as a main hand weapon. Even though we functionally use it as a offhand weapon, the Poison hand becomes a dual wielding setup when you two-hand it. So it doesn't even really matter that it's in our offhand. Now its Ashifor is actually pretty decent, but the selling point of using these fists is actually their charge attacks, as they have a lot of poise damage too. Within mere seconds we then stance break Romina as well, and we can swap over to any weapon of preference to get the juicy critical hit. And then I personally prefer to chain this with Spinning Thrust Gravity, as Romina tends to move around a lot, and this Ashifor is actually very good at tracking and sticking onto your targets as well. Overall, this is a very powerful way to deal with enemies too, using our offhand weapon, and it just shows you how insanely versatile my Wolfsbane build really is. We then do it again, stance breaking Romina over and over, getting another critical hit in, dodging their attacks, and then ultimately we find the opening to spin this STD giving Scorpion to death. Next up is Midra, and here we're going to really go all out with our setup. In the first part of the fight, when Midra isn't really the Lord of Frenzied Flame yet, we can quickly get rid of this thing with Spinning Gravity Thrust, where it also shows how it can function as a great gap closer, which is another bonus to this Ashifor. In the real fight then, we go nuts right away, generating our damage buffs, getting the Poison and Bloodlust proc, and doing insane DPS right away. We chain a few Spinning Gravity Thrusts as you see, as Midra will stay stationary for a good bit when it's spewing its Frenzied Flame. We just tank everything, you know, as by now you have also probably seen how good our sustain is well in the Wolfsbane setup. And the damage on Midra gets absolutely nuts. Since we hit Midra so many times in quick succession, we also then get the stance break, giving us even more momentum. We get the very satisfying and juicy riposte here, and follow it up with a great katana slash, and all of that while the poison keeps sticking at the same time too. That's the beauty of running a poison build, resulting in absolutely disgusting damage. Then we dodge a bit, you know, you don't want to get caught in Midra's explosion, and find a good opening for where we can use our Poison Flower Blooms twice, and when we do so, it's glorious. Nearly 40k damage in one sequence without having to worry about boss, and while we completely control and dictate the flow of the fight. And then for that last bit of HP, we're not going to waste any time. We just get our claws out and go nuts with them too, giving us insane DPS there as well, and even in those last seconds we still go over 10k damage in mere seconds through the fast DPS and burst of our claws. Another remembrance boss done. We have collected them all now except for Radahn. Radahn is then also next up. We start the fight with Spinning Gravity Thrust, and we aim for his nutsack in particular. See, aiming for the nutsack makes Radahn remember his glory years when he was younger, and when he was still a pimp and getting the Gluck Gluck 3000 on the regular. This in turn will give you that 6.9% damage buff in combat, swinging the fight in our favor, while also giving you the magic buff in real life of reducing the chance of premature ejaculation. Comment below if this strategy helped you out in that department. In phase 2, we ain't gonna deal with the developers going rogue or rich in background story. We sip that Iron Jar aromatic and go absolutely ham with our claws. See, I have said this before, but claws are truly the bane of Radahn's existence. Since Radahn is a bit of a creep and really likes to stalk you and be really in your face, you know, and claws, well, their peak performance is when something is right in your face. So the fight here becomes a lot more easy when we use our D-Claw special attack for that slice and dice goodness. Now here, I didn't cleanse the poison, I just kept slashing because I was holding onto our Poison Flower Blooms twice in case this guy decides to use his cheat codes and shoot up into the sky and then, yeah, one-shot you after that. But he didn't do that. So we kept just slashing, getting those juicy Bloodlust procs in addition to the Poison proc, and then ultimately we do finish off the fight with another Poison Flower Blooms twice at the end to burst him down. Radansky done. You have now defeated the DLC. Congratulations. Wolfsbane is truly powerful. Is there anything else the build can add to make it even more powerful then? In my opinion, no. This is peak poison gaming. However, the DLC also added another pure poison weapon called the Tooth Whip as well, which has innate deadly poison buildup too. And its Ashifor actually has a cool effect that reduces your enemy's stamina recovery, as indicated by the flashy green effect. However, this weapon is kinda hard to use well in PvE, and its Ashifor is also kinda janky to utilize well. So I would definitely not use it over what I went with in today's setup for my Wolfsbane build, but for them whip enthusiasts, yeah, well, you have another option here. An important aspect to make this build truly work is the setup. See, all the damage you've seen so far was without any buffs. It's just purely the power of the build and my idea behind it through its gear and synergies. See, every time we proc poison, and we can do that at all times thanks to our poison bottles as we can inflict it on ourselves, we immediately get the buff from our poisoned hand in our offhand, the buff from our mushroom crown, and the buff from from the Kindred of Wrath's Exaltation Talisman, which is combined already a 42% bonus damage increase right off the bat. Then in addition to our Mushroom Crown, we run the Divine Bird Warrior set for the armor, gauntlets and greaves, not just for the aesthetics and because it fits, but also because the greaves gives us a damage boost for all of our kicks. And the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ashifor is in fact considered a kick, because it's a kick. So another damage boost there, but our combination of armor pieces also gives us great defenses here and puts us over that 50 poise threshold to let us resist stance breaking hits. Now of course you might not like the aesthetic of the Mushroom Crown here, but it's a poison build, and poison is finally truly powerful. So you know we have to use it for the occasion, because it's actually a really good armor piece in that setup. But otherwise there are plenty of options to use alternatively that will match too aesthetically for the Mushroom Crown haters. For talismans then, in addition to the Kindred of Wrath's Exaltation Talisman, we use the Shard of Alexander, since we use our Ashes of Wars extensively, and this will make them even stronger. We use the DLC's Shattered Stone Talisman here as well, which raises our damage for kick-based Ashes of Wars, like the Poison Flower Blooms Twice, unconditionally with another 10%, so it's a great talisman here. And finally, we use the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman for the sustain, as we will trade hits all the time with this build, when we're for example mid-air using Spinning Gravity Thrust or trying to claw down our enemies with fast DPS. So this talisman is incredibly nice to make us tanky in addition to our armor set. If you want to go truly glass cannon and go offensive here, then alternatively the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia is going to be a great option too, since you will proc its max tier damage buff very quickly with our fast DPS and fast hitting Ashes of Wars like Spinning Gravity Thrust yet again. For the Flask of Wondrous Physic, we then for that exact reason use the Thorny Crack tier, which is the crystal tier version of that talisman essentially, but goes up to an even higher damage buff of up to 20%. And for the other crystal tier, we use the Dexterity Not Crystal tier to boost our AR some more. Alternatively, for this crystal tier, you can also go the defensive route here and go with the Opaline Heart tier as well, which will be a fantastic option for the sustain and trading as well. Now, see, you might have already guessed how this build scales, and well, it's through Dexterity and Arcane. Our poison bottles only scale with these stats, and our other weapons in the infusion that I went with also scale the best with these stats. We get 45 Arcane to reach that major soft cap for status effect build-up, like Poison and Bloodlust, which our build uses both of, obviously. And with 45 Arcane, we get everything we need in that department. Past 45 Arcane, the gains are pretty much trivial. Then we get 54 Dexterity, or 64 when considering our flask, to get good AR, and thus make us hit hard. This level is also nice for a build like this that invests in 2 damage stats, making us also pass the first major soft cap for physical damage on infusible weapons as well with our flask. Then 60 Vigor, soft capping on that for the sustain, 24 Endurance to be able to wear everything without getting in the heavy load category as well as for the stamina, and then 16 Mind for some extra FP just for our Ashes of Wars. And with that, you now know everything about my Wolfsbane build. Just remember, if you see seemingly innocent purple flowers in the wild, don't touch them or come near them. Outside of that, Poison is truly a S+ tier playstyle now, and enjoy your plague adventure ridden with suffocating and making enemies suffer to the max as the Wolfsbane. And after you've used my build and done that, then also make sure to check out my Nightshade build too. That build is a completely different build that has the ability to travel at the speed of lightning and assassinate targets quickly using magic and a personal type of shotgun.